Every down, there is a decision. Run or pass. From here, there is seemingly an infinite amount of variance, and one coach has called a lot of those plays with a lot of different cues.
Get ready to go on fourth down. Attack.
Roethlisberger, Manning, Luck, Palmer, Brady.
Oldest coach to ever win this Super Bowl.
And famously, Arians is known for his aggressive style.
I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what's the truth.
No risk it, no biscuit.
His play style was often criticized, especially with guys like Jameis Winston, who set the record for interceptions in a season. Taking risks like this is rare in the NFL. It's a conservative copycat league. So I wanted to know how Arians made these decisions. We talked about how an offense selects their plays for the week, the run-to-pass ratio for an offense, the evolution of offensive strategies, and of course, what it was like coaching some of the greatest ever. And now, my conversation with Bruce Arians. So I'm going to start with a quote from your book. This is a player that you maybe know of, at least decently, Ben Roethlisberger. Bruce is a gambler at heart. He's always thinking about how he can set up a defense to deliver that knockout punch. Now, do you think coaches are maybe more concerned with the sticks than scoring? Do you think they're maybe more concerned with the battle rather than winning the war?
Yeah, I think a lot of them get that way. But for me, no risk it, no biscuit. It's always been the way. And, it's 3rd and 2. You want to get that first down. But if you got that matchup outside you really like or in the slot, take it. Take your shot down the field. Chunk plays, explosive plays, that's the easier way to score than trying to grind it out. If you're trying to just play the sticks all day, you're going to score a lot of points.
Yeah, I mean, there's a loss aversion of sorts. And I think that makes sense. You feel that energy as a fan. We just need to move the chains. We just need to get a first down here. And it maybe blinds a coach or a play caller to, we finally got the matchup we've been looking for. The defense will not be expecting this. I can feel that energy as a fan. I'm sure coaches can feel that. I see it in finance. There is a larger emotional impact to a 10% decline than a 10% gain. I get phone calls when the market's not doing that great. I don't really get phone calls in this year. So you could see where that loss aversion maybe sets in for a coach.
Well, I think for me, it's always that situation where, hey, we got to play smart, not scared. And there's a big difference. Like you said, playing for the sticks, get the first down, that's not necessarily given. But in those situations, you can usually get a matchup with your best receiver. You're going to get one-on-one a lot of times because they're not going to play a too deep shell. They're going to load up the box to stop that run, that little play action pass. And that's when you get a Mike Evans on a slot corner, or you get a Chris Godwin on somebody, Larry Fitzgerald on somebody, one-on-one, and hey, don't miss that shot because it's an easy layup for a quarterback. The guys that can really can spin it and they're very accurate within 20 to 30 yards. You don't want to throw it 40 to 50. You want to hit that 20 to 30 that's going to run for 50.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always fascinated by the equilibriums that form in sports, whether it's basketball, 2 versus 3, or football, you have run versus pass, right? These equilibriums form. John Nash, famous for the Nash equilibrium, talked about how that exists in many different parts of life, whether it's business, 2 competitors, or it's in football when you have a defense and an offense. And so if we look at that equilibrium throughout time, in football, run versus pass, teams were more run heavy. They, in the early mid-2000s, started to shift. About 55% of the plays called were runs. That shifted up to about 60%. It's plateaued over the last 10 years, so it's 60% roughly as far as dropbacks. In 2015, it's about 60% now. What do you make of that balance? Do you think that teams are maybe throwing it too much? Do you think they're maybe running it too much? It seems to be a league-wide shift that's occurred there.
Yeah, I think one of the best stats I ever saw when Joe Gibbs was running the Redskins, they had called 20,000 plays roughly, and it was 10,000 runs and 10,000 passes. It was amazing. And I always try to call the game 50-50 up until the fourth quarter. Then the fourth quarter kind of decides, hey, we're down 10, we're throwing it every down. We're up 10, we're going to run it and try to kill this clock. So I think that's where a lot of stats get skewed a little bit, is that fourth quarter. everybody would love to stay 50-50, equal run pass, drop back short, play action passes, all those things. Now get to that fourth quarter. What's the game say? What's the game telling you now that we have to do? And when you're able to take the ball and run it, that's a great feeling. Now, it's hard to do in this league too, but you got to have a really smart quarterback who's going to play safe and not, like I said, play smart, not scared.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge, as you mentioned, how difficult it is to run. And we know that the EPA per play, whether it's yards per attempt or EPA per play, whatever you want to look at, passing technically gets you more yards than running. And this question emerges, okay, well, why run? And the obvious is, okay, if you only pass, the defense could just set up in, their coverage to just limit the pass. If you even said, okay, the running back or the quarterback can never run. So clearly we need to run a little bit. The question is always, that balancing act. And is what we've found is, there's been a shift a little bit towards passing, but it's plateaued. And I guess I just wonder, looking out, forward looking, if there'll be any shift back, passing efficiency. There's less interceptions now, but we're not seeing the same big plays. And so will we see a shift back towards maybe closer to that 50-50 or 55-45 versus 60-40? I don't know. You're a guy though that's lived through one of those shifts. So I'm just curious, what do you think is on the event horizon there?
I think some of it's your personnel, and the other thing that's adding to the run now is we're getting these athletic quarterbacks. And when you have a quarterback that can run, especially down in the red zone, it's just kind of you got an extra blocker all the time because your running back can go out and block for your quarterback, and you can set up formations. And I think Philly, that's a copycat league. I mean, Philly ran the ball last year and won the Super Bowl with Saquon Barkley and the play action pass off of it. Kansas City, a little bit of run, and that's Patrick Mahomes, and he goes and wins the game. But each year it's a little bit cyclical. It's a copycat league for sure. And I think the teams that are balanced are usually the teams that are playing in January and February.
Yeah, there's a balancing act. And you look at the good running teams, they're typically good passing teams. You look at the good passing teams, they're typically good running teams. We think of Baltimore Ravens as a great rushing team. Lamar's hurt right now, but we think of them as that. They're also a great passing team. So what is really opening up what? I think we have an inclination to believe, okay, it's probably the fact that Lamar can do all these crazy things on the ground that opens up their passing attack. But what it does is because both are good, it moves that minimax up, right? The effectiveness of each play type, it's this equilibrium moves up together. I'm really curious, though, about your perception of this because I sense something listening to coaches, and I definitely sense this playing for a coach that was like this. There's a defensiveness towards the run, a protective element the coaches feel, the sacred motion, the sacred play type. We need to establish the run. We need to run more. We need to get in and play smash mouth football. Passing is seen as weak. Running is seen as the tough, good football thing to do. You are familiar with this, probably. Why do coaches feel such a defensiveness to protect the run?
Well, I think that old saying, hey, you got to run the ball in January. But I've taken a team and, in the snow and thrown for 420 yards with a backup quarterback. So it's like, hey, just let's take what they're giving us. We're not going to beat our head down this and try to beat a nail into the wall because we have to run the ball. You don't get any points for a number of runs. And again, you're not going to score a lot of points if you're running it 30 or 40 times. Now, you're going to win maybe, but you still got to throw the football to win the game. And especially inside the 25, you got to have a quarterback that's not afraid to put it in these little pigeonholes and score touchdowns. If you kick a lot of field goals, you're probably going to get beat.
Yeah. How big is an NFL playbook, too? Like, how many plays are in it?
Oh, gosh, it could be anywhere from 200 to 400. The combinations now, they're probably only about 30 pass concepts, but you can run them so many different ways. So your quarterback, he has the same reads, they're all different pictures. And same thing, running game, you're going to have 10 or 11, 12 basic runs that you might not carry all of them into a game plan. But again, it's the complexity of the passing game and situational football. I think situated football is a huge part of the game. You got to be really good in third down. You got to win the turnover battle. The penalties. All right, know your referees. We have a scouting report on referees every week because they're all so different, and how they call the game. But yeah, I think for that main purpose, going back to balance, but you've got to be able to throw the football to score.
And an NBA team needs to be able to make a three if they want to win an NBA championship. I think that's the closest comparison here. You can't just throw it into your post and have them post up. You will lose. You will lose in the NBA. You will not win a championship if you do not shoot threes. And we've realized just how valuable that is. But from a coaching standpoint, there's something that can happen subconsciously. I think it can bleed into bias. If you're coaching a team and they shoot 50 threes, and maybe the game before they took 20 threes, they will almost certainly miss more shots in the game they took 50 threes. That does not mean that they're less effective. They've just missed more threes. But you maybe view that as a binary outcome. We've missed more shots. We need to do something different. We're missing shots, especially if you've just lost. If you're winning, a lot of times you don't question things. You don't look back. We need to pack it in more. We need to work it around more, get better shots, get it into the key, not go to our star as much, whatever, right? But the reality is you might have had the right approach. You just had an off shooting night. And in football, you have a 0-yard play and an incompletion, and typically more yards than you would get with a rush. So you maybe start viewing it as that binary outcome of just, okay, we had a string of 3 incompletions in a row. We need to just get back to running the football. The quarterback, the passing game might have just had an off day. So I'm curious how much of that subconscious bias maybe plays into a coach's mind of just viewing this thing as a binary outcome.
Yeah, I think sometimes a lot of young coaches today get so caught up in analytics. The book says do this, and the book says, I don't know who the hell wrote that book, though. That's the thing that kills me. It wasn't Don Shula for sure, or Bill Belichick. So it is 4th and 1, or it's 3rd and 2. Can I block that guy across from me? Can my tight end actually handle that guy off the edge? And it might be easier to throw a ball into the flat than run it for a yard. So it's again, the NFL is so matchup oriented and driven that you got to know those matchups. And it's like, okay, they got Chris Jones over there who's going to split that gap. You know that you better double team him, and that might free a linebacker up though. So you got to have it, gosh, to the millimeter in those situations, especially 3rd 2, 4th and 1, 4th and 2. Everybody's going for it inside the 59 with his 4th and 5 or less because that's what the book says. And majority of those, other than the Eagles last year, probably were passes. And they would actually rip you on a run or two with Saquon.
Yeah. Did you have an analytics guy?
I never had one. I did not believe in it. Yeah, no, because no one in my headset, no one spoke unless it was, hey, tell me the down and distance, what hash it's on. And but again, I had a guy that clock management is totally different to me. I had a clock management guy, that was always in my ear. Hey, next day, the next meet, it's time for a timeout. It's time for this. It's time for that. We're in this situation. You might think about this.
Yeah. Were you calling? I know you were calling the plays for a good chunk of your career, but at some point, if I remember right,
when I went to Tampa Bay, I turned it over to Byron Leftwich.
That's right.
And then I was more the clock management guy to help him, and but he called all the plays and did all the game plans.
Yeah, and it's less frequent now that you have NFL head coaches calling plays than maybe 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, I think actually more now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 20 years ago, you might have had 3 or 4. John Gruden, Andy Reid, a few of me, maybe.
So then it maybe changed. Yeah,
it changed a bunch because people now are hiring offensive coaches as head coaches to call the plays, and they're really just hiring an offensive coordinator. And they and they have a defensive guy that's a veteran guy that runs that side of the ball for them, and a special teams guy. So I think, again, the hiring cycle is so cyclical. When Belichick was winning, there's a lot of defensive coaches getting hired. Andy Reid started winning, a lot of offensive coaches got hired. So it's so cyclical.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, going through that progression in a week, I want to just understand a little bit how it would work. So you'd have, let's just say 300-400 maybe plays in the playbook, and there's all these variants off of it. Let's say an infinite amount of ways you could run variants off of those plays. At the beginning of the week, is it, okay, I huddle up with my coaches and we decide what, 100 plays or whatever we're going to fixate on for this week. And by Tuesday, I'm meeting with this person, and you kind of wither it down to eventually getting a script and what that script is for the first drive. I'm just curious, how does that progress throughout the week? Because clearly you're not going into the week and you're saying, hey guys, we're going to run one of these 400 plays. You're probably not saying that to your players on Monday. You're probably, kind of progressing and almost funneling down to something. I guess just talk through that progression if you could.
Yeah, a Monday is usually early in the season is a review of the last game. And let's get the film done. Let's get all the corrections made, all the good things, all the bad things, how we did in situational football, what were our penalties, how did we beat ourselves, and how we're going to fix that first. And then the coaches would break and start going. For us, it was straight to blitz reel, because if you can't handle the blitz in the NFL, you're going to get beat. And it was all about our protections. Make sure we got our protections for this week set, our hots, our sights, how we're going to teach the quarterback and the receivers to handle the blitz. And then in the evening, have dinner, go in the evening and get the running game down on Monday. Tuesday was spent almost all day passing game. We had a board where we filled everything out on the board, and we kind of went right in order. Third down was next, right? Because it was the most important. Play action pass, screens, gadgets. The running game's already up on the board from last night. Then you can script the Wednesday practice. And you script your Wednesday practice, and it's mostly all first and second down with some third down mixed in. Thursday or Wednesday night, you're putting in your red zone, which is in your goal line, short yardage stuff. Thursday for us was a cleanup night. And again, Thursday's practice were those situational footballs, maybe a 2-minute walkthrough on how they play 2-minute defense. Friday was your short yardage goal line, all your gadgets, and your long script. Saturday's your walkthrough where you cover the Hail Mary and all the little things that happen in a game. And for me, Saturday night was a very, very important meeting. And sometimes it was Friday. I'd meet with the quarterback, and we would go through that entire plan and make sure that, all right, you give me your top 6. That's how I'm going to call them. You want this one first in this situation, 3rd and 2 to 4. I want these 5 to 6, 7 to 8, 10 plus, red zone. Any play on his game plan that you don't like or you're not totally sold on, tell me, I'll scratch it off. We're not calling. I'm not calling a play that you don't feel totally comfortable with. And then we would also meet on our no huddle offense. There are some quarterbacks that are allowed to run that themselves. And what we were looking for in our no huddle, and Ben did a great job of it. Peyton did a great job of it, but Tommy too. So you had, by then, Saturday morning, you had the entire, anything that could happen in the game, you hope covered. All the rocks were uncovered, and that's kind of how it went. And then play the game and do it all over again.
So would you take then, so let's just say you start with maybe 300-400 Monday potential play types, and then by practice, is it down to like 100 by Tuesday?
Yeah,
maybe?
pretty much down to 100, 115 on your call sheet.
And then you eventually wither it down further.
One of the things you do, you self-scout. All right, so what do they have in their breakdown? I always had, first thing handed to me Monday morning by one of my guys was all the stuff on us that they have broken down in the last 4 games. We're going to run any of that. All right, we're going to run those same plays, but they're not going to be in those formations. And I never called the same pass. Tried never to call the same pass twice in a game.
Really?
Yeah, the defenses are way too sharp. They see it once, you're not going to probably get it on them again.
That was something I was curious about, is how true that is, because you hear like, oh, they showed their cards. Like, why did they show their cards for this play early on in the game? Like, you wonder, okay, but did they really show their cards? Could they have run that same play again and it would have worked?
Now, it happens a lot in the run, and there might be a play action or two that you might repeat just because you saw something. But you should have enough on that sheet that there's something similar or it's the same play from a different formation. So the quarterback, when his back's turned and he turns around, he's going to have the same picture. There's going to be three guys going down the opposite sideline. And I just saw a picture of what they had tried to stop it with. So, yeah, I think that part of it is why you have to have enough stuff. But your guys have to also be able to learn it all, too.
Sure. And how you mentioned at the end there, you would let the quarterback pick his favorite plays. I don't know if you know how rare that is or how frequent it is. I mean, how common is that across the league where you have a quarterback coming in and choosing his own plays?
Yeah, I think I know Sean Payton has always done it. Like, there's a couple of guys, I think Andy does it with Patrick and Matt Nagy. They sit down and say, all right, what do you like? What don't you like? And for me, it's always been that back and forth between us. And if there was one I really liked, and he didn't like it on Wednesday, I might stick it back in the script on Friday just to see if I can talk him into it. But because I really liked it. But if they don't like it, don't call it.
You have to imagine most of the time the quarterback's plays that they like are ones that you would probably like too. But in what scenarios is it maybe, Roethlisberger, Manning, Brady coming in and you're like, I don't know about that. Actually, I disagree. We probably shouldn't. In what scenarios is maybe a quarterback coming in a little bit overzealous or too confident with a play type that they're coming to you with?
A lot of times, Tommy would have a lot of good ideas, Peyton also, and Ben left a lot of it to me, but Ben was really good in the no-huddle when he would try to score before I scored sometimes, I think, when he was calling the plays. Andrew Luck, hey, you just call him, coach, let me play quarterback. He was a rookie too, but so those guys, I think they're all the same. They've got ideas, and they study enough tape, how you want to attack. But you've done so much of this in the spring and in training camp. It's just a pullback from, hey, Peyton was one of the few guys that you could be on the sideline and say, you remember last year against Washington, we ran this play? We didn't practice it this week. But this is the same coverage they were playing when you threw that touchdown. Oh, yeah, he'll take the picture, he'll run down, tell Marvin, and, yeah, man, remember this? And I'm going to hit you on the post. And you could call it, and he'd deliver,
Yeah.
And some of the other guys, that's so fast. We didn't practice that this week, And but he was one of the rare guys that could. He had a notebook in his head that was just unbelievable.
That he could just call back to. Didn't he have a film room that like mirrored the Colts film room or something?
Oh, he had his own office. Yeah, he had his own office at the Colts complex. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a coach's office.
Did he have one at his house too?
Oh yeah, and I think Carson Palmer. I know we did all the virtual reality stuff with him, and he loved it. So he put it in his house, and he'd go through the entire practice.
When you say virtual reality, like he would put a headset on or something?
Yeah, we had GoPros that actually stand behind the drill and film our practice live. And then you put the headset on and you can see your receivers. It was our actual practice. It wasn't a video game. And it's an amazing teaching tool, especially for your backup quarterback. He could go in a room and get every rep, drop back and get every rep in practice, especially in the blitz drills and the 7-on-7s. It was a great teaching tool. Not all the guys liked it. But Carson absolutely loved it, and Kelly Holcomb loved it. Yeah, there are a lot of good guys that did it.
I'm sure as it gets closer to reality, more people maybe come around and they put it on. They're like, wow, this is actually...
Yeah, I had a real tough time. I try to watch. I get vertigo every time. So
yeah, it does make you a little sick, and you just can't help but fool yourself, and then you kind of get in this weird space. NFL Pro Era is, I think, the big one now that works with a lot of teams, from my understanding. But yeah, I mean... So I guess I'm curious then, once you got to the game time, okay, so we start with 100, we wither it down. We start with 300, we wither it down to 100. Then, the quarterback is maybe picking a few plays. Do you script out the first series? Do most coaches script out the first series? Is it the first 20 plays? I mean, what are they typically doing, and do they ever deviate from that?
Yeah, I think most coaches script the first 15. I script 2 15 scripts. And again, I take our running game coordinator said, all right, give me your 15 best runs. And I let the quarterback pick his 15 best passes. And I would mix them in there. And how I would go down the field in my office, just boom, boom, boom here, and how these mattered, how we're setting this one up for the big play, maybe later in the second quarter. The other thing is then you're going to go off script to situational football because you've got your third down script, you've got your red zone scripts. So once we hit those areas, you might be off your main script, all right, because it's really the 1st and 10 open field script. And then you get back in your situational football so that it's a very fluid thing. For me, calling plays was easy because the game was already called. There's only maybe 4 gut calls in a game. And but for me, it was called on Thursday night, sitting in an office getting ready.
You already had it dialed.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I got to imagine there's a weird scenario that you get in as a coach when you call a play and you can see the light. You can see that play forming perfectly. And for one reason or another, a freaking player just does not execute and the play blows up. And one, that's got to be infuriating because you're sitting there like, okay, we rep this 15 times. This guy knows what he should do and he short-circuited at the worst possible moment. But it's also got to be frustrating because then you have to deal for the big plays with the fallout. Somebody coming to you after the game and saying, well, why did you call that play? I got to imagine that has to, because you can't call out the player in that scenario. You're not going to sit there and be like, well, yeah, our tight end fucked up. It's his fault. You can't say that in that scenario. You have to, maybe dance around it a little bit because you're not going to just throw a guy under the bus. So I got to imagine that's got to be one of the tougher moments as a play caller.
Yeah, and there are times to throw him under the bus. All right, there's times when you say, hey, we had a mental error on the play, and you might not say who it was, but everybody in the locker room knows who it was, and so I say we're not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, we're going. The one thing about us, you might not like what I say, but I'm going to say the truth.
Yeah,
right? The truth hurts sometimes, but guys really appreciate the truth and honesty. They don't. They smell bullshit. That's for sure, and. You've got to be straight with them. And, I've said something about Tom Brady throwing an interception in the game. Oh, my God, you criticized Tom Brady publicly. No, he threw the damn interception. I didn't.
There's probably, so I stand corrected. So there is, there's moments where you do it, it's maybe something that more coaches should do then.
Oh, I think the locker room, we started every meeting what we called an accountability sheet. All right. Every missed assignment, every penalty in practice, you got called out in front of the team. And, when your star player's up there, sometimes he gets really pissed. I know Larry Fitzgerald, I love him to death, man. He would argue, Coach, that was not a mistake. I shouldn't be on that sheet. And I said, Larry, it technically was. All right. You got to take me off that sheet. Okay, I'll take you off the sheet. And, and the guys do not like being on that sheet, especially latter days of the Thursday, Friday practice. Like you said, we might have repped this play once and you busted it on Friday. That is totally unacceptable.
Yeah. So you would have an accountability sheet for practices too. So like people that messed up in practices, not just games.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think about just like the corporate world trying that out? You get to work on a Monday and your manager has an accountability sheet and be like, yeah, this guy really blew it in this call.
Yeah, I think for business, a lot of guys get fired that way. It's a lot easier to fire them in business than it is in the NFL, but to replace them. So I say, I'm going to tolerate you till I can replace you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Okay. So what do you think is a scenario where the public fails to understand maybe the nuances of play calling and just being a coach? Like, I'm sure there's moments where you're like, okay, it's actually more complicated than that, but I can't make a statement here for 5 minutes. I got to get on with my day. What are some examples, or maybe an example at least, of something where the public just fails to understand the nuances of play calling?
Yeah, I think the Monday morning quarterbacks are the best. It's always after the fact. Oh, you should have thrown it. He knew they were going to stop the run. Oh, it's incomplete. You should have ran it. And you're always going to face that. And you as long as you can look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, we did exactly what we said we were going to do. They beat our ass, or, hey, we were successful. And, but again, I think, so much goes into self-scout, for us, that we don't get stuck in those situations. But there's always going to be that Monday morning cornerback. And now there's so many talking heads. Everybody's got a podcast. Everybody's got a show. And they all got the best ideas. And none of them coached a day in their life.
Yeah, those guys suck. I hate those guys. So, quick background check here, since we're on to business and management. I promise this isn't personal, but how many times did you get fired?
9 times.
9 times. So does that include collegiately?
Yes.
Okay. So 9 separate times you got called into an office. Was it always they called you into the office, they sat you down, or was sometimes like by email or text?
It was all face to face every time. And, I think I moved my wife 20 times.
Oh, wow.
And the kids, probably 18. My daughter was one of those unlucky ones that went 9th, 10th, 11th.
Military man.
Yeah, to different high schools. My son got real lucky, and he got to stay in one high school and win a state championship, get a scholarship. So, but my daughter now has a business that she I think it really helped her learning how to meet people, meet new friends and everything. That she's doing a great job in her business.
So, okay, so 9 times. Was there a moment that hurt or was more emotional than the others?
Oh, they all hurt because they're all right at Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
Especially the college game. You walk up and knock on my daughter's door, and she look at my face. We're moving again. Yeah, we're moving again. But I mean, my wife did a great job of always saying, hey, the next place is better. You're going to have better friends. You're never going to lose good friends. If these will be friends for the rest of your life, you're going to have more friends. And this city has this city has that. And we just build them up. And it's very, very hard to be a coach's wife.
I bet. Yeah, I bet. Yeah. I mean, 9 times though, it's something that, the coaching profession provides you this experience that not many people experience. People get fired. I think just about everyone has been let go at some point or will be let go at some point, but 9 times you maybe build a little bit more of a tolerance towards it, and then you maybe digest it a little bit differently. Was it easier as it went on? Was it harder the first time that it happened?
Oh, it was always harder the first couple, yeah. And, you're starting your career. I mean, my first full-time job at Virginia Tech, I got hired, bought a little house, had a baby, and got fired.
Jeez.
All right. We went down to Mississippi State, bought another house, had another baby, got fired. But I got retained on that staff. So it was welcome to coaching. And Luke Linden, the old equipment manager at Virginia Tech, he said, hey, boy, I hear you want to be a coach. I said, yeah. He said, build your house on wheels.
Because you started with Bear Bryant.
No, I actually started at Virginia Tech under Jimmy Sharp, who was Bear Bryant's offensive coordinator.
Okay. What was Bryant like?
Oh, Coach Bryant was awesome. The master of personnel. And I'm talking about the entire building. But people didn't realize we played 66 players in every game. He substituted personally every player. No assistant coach substituted a player. He'd rotate quarterbacks. I had to have 12 running backs ready. And I didn't get to say who started, when they played, who played. He did it all the way to the last game. Wow.
So he was rotating guys in and out like way more frequently than a normal game that you'd watch today?
Nobody platooned like him. He would wear you out.
Hockey subs.
It looked like hockey subs. Yes, it did. Very, very similar. Everybody was fresh all the time. We always had fresh legs in the backfield. And, he was a master. I mean, he could walk in and know the secretary was down and say something to pick her day up. He knew I was cocky as hell. He loved ripping my ass and seeing how much I could take. And then he got me a head coaching job. So it was very well, I was the youngest head coach in the country back then.
Yeah. It's difficult to, maybe visualize this, but coaches and all of us really have this internal computer of sorts. And of course, there are people that are blessed in certain ways to have an intuitive computer to really feel others, right? I think sometimes being sensitive is looked down upon, but in reality, being sensitive is actually a very valuable asset. If you can feel how your other players are feeling and you don't ignore them. Now, of course, there's maybe some coaches that are just like, Yeah, I don't build that relationship as much as others. How important is that? Because I'm sure there's a point where you're a coach and you're like, I can't just go coddle this guy. I don't want to coddle this guy. I don't want to set that example. But there's other times where you're like, okay, I really have to build a relationship and kind of give some tough love and not go to him and try to be his best friend, kind of like parenting. Like, I'm not here to be your best friend. I'm here to be your dad. And the parallels maybe aren't the same with football, and maybe you don't want to be labeled as a dad, but there are parallels there nonetheless. There's times where you have to be a coach and times where you have to maybe pick someone up. I'm curious how you navigated that.
Yeah, I think one of the best advice Coach Bryant gave me right before I left to go to be the head coach at Temple was coach them hard and hug them later. If it ain't perfect, we're going to fix it. All right. And if it's not perfect, don't take it personal, because I'm going to say some ugly things to you. I'm just talking about your football sucks. You're a hell of a guy, but your football really sucks right now. Okay. We got to get this fixed. Now, if I get on a guy ass really bad, I'll find him in the locker room afterwards, make sure he's good, and because they have to know you care. And I think, to me, that was the building those relationships. Sometimes that people said I got too close to my players. I don't think there's such a thing. There's got to be a trust factor that when I ask them a question, they're not afraid to say the truth, especially a quarterback. Why the hell did you throw that ball there? Well, this is what I saw. I said, great, but that's not what really happened. But that's at least you're telling me what you saw. I saw the middle linebacker do this, but I didn't see the safety. Great. All right, let's get that fixed. So there can't be a fear of I'm gonna bullshit the coach. Now I'm gonna tell you the truth, coach. This, I screwed that up, or don't say my bad. I hate that one. And but there has to be a trust factor between a player and their position coach, the coordinator, and the head coach. And the head coach, I think, sometimes stands off too much. But I think they're really, really good ones. Their players love them. Their players will die for them because they know they care.
Yeah, I had a chance to play for a lot of different coaches in basketball and football, but I played longer in basketball than I did football, and I had a coach in college that was really dialed from an X's and O's standpoint. We ran all these sets that worked phenomenally, and we had a great offense because of it. But he really struggled to relate and talk to the players. You'd walk by him in the hallway, and the guy was just awkward. Like he would not talk to you. And it, I think, really does wear on a locker room and a player. When a guy lights into you like that, we all love to say like, oh yeah, I just shrug it off. It's not a big deal. But when you get lit up in front of everyone in practice and you're maybe having an off day, or you've collected stamps throughout the day to where you're going into that day, maybe just a little bit more like on edge and just a little emotional, whatever. We all get like that. It's just human. Mm-hmm. And so when you get laid into by a coach and then he walks by you and you just kind of get this sense without even really internalizing it that he's giving up on you in some way. Mm-hmm. I mean, it just absolutely, it can cause an implosion of sorts. And, for me, it was my time actually in Alaska. I changed as a basketball player. I just wasn't as good on the court because of it. And I'm sure there's a lot of self-reflecting I could do that is, okay, this is a lot on me. But I think, a big part of it, if I'm being honest, is I struggled to have a relationship really with the coach, and it changed what I started doing on the court.
Oh, I think totally. Yeah. I mean, I think, like you said, I've been around some coaches that'll rip guys' ass and just walk away and not find them later. And
that's the key, right?
Yeah. I think later, the later part. And in the meeting room, you might rip their ass on the field, and in the meeting room say, okay, why'd you step with this foot? All right. And let's have this dialogue. Let's have this dialogue how we're getting better. And I think when you can, the great coaches can make players better, and it's not your X's and O's. It's your fundamentals. It's how you see the game, because there's a million X's and O's. And again, the game is cyclical. Now we're seeing all these jet sweeps. I saw the jet sweep in Mississippi Junior College back in the 70s. So it's like there's nothing really new in this game that you can do. The single wing and the shotgun and all the things that have transpired throughout those years. But again, getting back to those relationships, it's all about relationships. And people say, do you miss coaching? I miss relationships.
Yeah, I bet. It's like you said, going and finding that guy after. And again, I think that some people are maybe born with that, and others aren't. And some people are maybe just reluctant and stubborn to where they just don't want to build that skill set. But it's obviously very important. Now, you coached a few decent quarterbacks. I'm really curious what you have to say about this. Okay, so Roethlisberger, Manning, Luck, Carson Palmer, Tom Brady, just to name a few here. I had a chance to talk with Zach Kiefer of The Athletic. He did that wonderful story on how NFL teams can fail young quarterbacks. I'm curious for you, because you coached great quarterbacks. How much of it do you think was the surrounding infrastructure and maybe the relationship that you built with those guys, and how much of it was, okay, these guys were just different?
Yeah, they're all different, but they all have one thing in common. They hate losing. And they love winning. And there's probably more of a fear of losing than a love of winning that drives some of them. They can will themselves on the rest of the people. And I've never been I call it grit. Some people call it leadership abilities, but to me, Tom would get on your ass and then right away fix it. Hey, I would tell I had this young receiver, every time he came out of his break, his arms would drop, and Tom would throw the ball. Tommy gets on his ass. Hey, when you're coming out of your break, you got to pump your arms because I'm throwing the ball out here. Okay, Tommy. I said, hey, Tommy, can you tell this guy over here to do this too? Because he ain't listening to me either. But he's listening to you. Mm-hmm. And Peyton was totally different in his way. Ben's they're all so different. I had Peyton his rookie year, and we were talking about this yesterday. When he threw 28 interceptions in today's game, I would have gotten fired as a quarterback coach. Tom Moore would probably gotten fired as the offensive coordinator in October or November. All right?
And he might have been benched.
And they would have benched him. All right. We were 3-13, but we were getting better every week. We saw it. We were a bad football team that year. Next year we're 13-3, and he's in the Hall of Fame. So you got to give these guys 3 years in an offense before you know if they're good or not. You can't determine it in 8 games. And
right.
So it's to me, it's first of all, I think it's 6 out of the last quarterbacks drafted number 1. The coach got fired the first year. All right. So you lost a quarterback coach, a coordinator, and a head coach, and you move on. Well, that's just wiped out. That whole year's wiped out. And you might have learned something about defense, but you're going to have to learn a whole new offense and a new way to attack defense. And I go back to Blaine Gabbert, who was one of the most talented guys I ever had. But he had 7 offensive coordinators and 8 head coaches his first 7 years. Until he was with us in Arizona, he'd never been in the same offense 2 years in a row. And I think that's how we're failing these young quarterbacks in today's game, is that we don't have any patience. It's a win right now. And usually if you draft number 1, you got a shitty team. You're not a great team to start with.
You're going to struggle losers curse.
One guy isn't going to fix it.
Yeah.
And you got to build around him. Andrew Luck was amazing, but that team had something different. Chuck had leukemia, and they had something to play for and fight for. And Andrew he won 7 games in the last minute that year to go 11-5. And Jaden Daniels, I thought, was amazing last year because he won 6, I think, in the last minute. But for a rookie, that's amazing.
But at the same time, you have it's got to be really tough to make this call. In defensive organizations, you have, like, looking at the Colts right now. Okay, so you have Anthony Richardson, doesn't really go well. He, maybe makes some comments that don't shine a good light on him as far as, being tired, I think was his comment when he came out. I was like, why'd you come out? I was like, well, I was tired. He's like, well, that's tough to say publicly and have the public on your side. So they replace him. They bring in Daniel Jones. The entire city thinks this is insanity to bring in Daniel Jones. And we look at what the Colts are doing now. We look at what Daniel Jones is doing now. And so I guess, like, at what point do you pull the ripcord? how do you manage that? Because if you give a guy 3 years, you give Anthony Richardson 3 years, well, the Colts might not be in the playoffs right now, at least the playoff hunt.
Oh yeah, and that same thing. Somebody's getting fired. For me, when you draft a guy that high that's only had 8 games, that's not even maybe 100, 400 plays that he saw in college that has no bearing on the NFL. And you're expecting him to win as a rookie just because he's a hellacious athlete. It doesn't fly. It just doesn't fly. You got to. It's at least 3 years to get.
He had no business even being in that position.
Yeah, and so it's like once you draft him, you're like, hey, this is a 3-year project. And like I said, it took 2 years with Peyton to flip it, and he had all those years at Tennessee and the SEC. So I think you're seeing these guys come out younger, less prepared, but more athletic, and maybe more gifted, but not mentally prepared to play the game.
Right. So I guess how do you know? And maybe they need to have a good surrounding if you're going to throw them in to the fire. They maybe need to have that, and otherwise you're maybe going into developmental mode. How do you know though if a guy is ready? Because from what you just mentioned and from the outside, it's like college doesn't really seem to have much bearing on how you're going to do in the NFL. How do you know in preseason? Let's just say, okay, we'll talk about Caleb Williams. How do you know that he's the guy that you should play week 1 last year? How do you know that Anthony Richardson is? How do you go about that decision?
Well, for me, when you draft them that high, they're playing. Because to me, they don't learn enough carrying a clipboard. First of all, they're not getting reps in practice. And they need every single rep they can get to get better. And they have to go out and fail. And how do they handle failure and how do they handle success? And knowing that they're going to make mistakes and this is going to be a growing situation. Very seldom. Ben was probably the one guy that got on a team because he went, I think, 10th or 11th, that had one of the best defenses in the world and had Jerome Bettis, Willie Parker. And Kenny Wisdom did a great job with Ben building a play-action game, building a running game, and then playing 4 wides and 3rd down in 2 minutes that he was very accustomed to and built it to suit his skill set. But the rest of the guys, man, it takes a lot of teaching, a lot of patience, and a lot of, hey, this is what you should have done. That's a great job. Let's repeat that. And so like I said, I think patience is the key with these young guys. And when you're evaluating in the draft, you really got to do your homework.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to do your homework on everything, background check, everything about his family, everything that you can possibly find out about this guy. And I've gone to schools and asked janitors, like, hey, what's going on today?
Well, you were there for Ryan Leaf, weren't you? The Ryan Leaf. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that was Bill Polian loved Ryan Leaf. He thought he was Jim Kelly, and Ryan was big, strong, fast. There are some times that his off the field stuff was a little bit immature, And I know when we asked him, when you're coming into minicamp, he said, no, I'm taking my guys down to Cabo that weekend. That didn't fly too good with Bill and Jim Mora, and we were right to the wire.
Cabo's pretty fun though, man.
It was right to the wire on that decision between Peyton and Ryan.
So, okay, so he maybe hit up like Mango Deck in Cabo.
Yeah, and he skipped the meeting in Indy for us. And that
and there were still guys that wanted to draft him, right?
Oh, yeah, he went number 2.
So no, I mean like in your organization at the time.
Oh yeah, they sure did.
So you were with the Colts during that period, right?
Yep.
And there were still guys with the Colts despite the Cabo trip, despite blowing you off. It's maybe like that girlfriend that you maybe like her more because of it. I don't know. There were still guys that were feeling that.
Oh, definitely, yeah, because he was so talented. His arm was unbelievable, and his size, and he was. For Bill, he would just remind him a lot of Jim Kelly.
Yeah. How many guys are, you just stare at the quarterbacks, how many guys are capable? Like I did this video on, we don't really know what good is with quarterbacks because every year, if you just look back a year, it's like you just look at the narratives going into it and it's seemingly completely different. Daniel Jones, a guy that we just mentioned, right? Sam Darnold. Baker Mayfield, three guys right off the bat that were written off. Suddenly they look pretty good. They look like they're going to be Pro Bowlers. How many guys do you think are capable at the position? Can you talk through any examples of, okay, this guy was going to be really good, but he was maybe just not quite there in his touch, or not quite there in his processing, or we just didn't develop in the right way? I'm just curious, how many guys do you think are capable?
Oh, God, there's a bunch. I go back to Timmy Couch. Timmy Couch was no bust. He got busted up. He got sacked like 122 times his first 2 years, tore his labrum up, tore his elbow up. And, and I got him. He took the Browns to the playoffs and got his leg broken in the last game. And then Kelly Holcomb goes in and throws for 410 yards against the Steelers in the snow. But yeah, there are so many capable guys. And it's not always that top round pick. When you look at the Brock Purdy's and Tom Brady's and some of those guys, that Joe Montana's that were drafted a little bit later, that they had that ultimate grit and that accuracy that goes with it, and an understanding of the game. And top for Tommy, it's that driven, unbelievable instinct to win that he has.
Yeah. Do you think maybe the tools are sometimes overrated, and we maybe downplay the processing of a quarterback?
Yeah, I go back. I look at, I never tried to value a quarterback at the combine. And I go back and watch Mark Bolger from West Virginia come out and say, man, this guy has no arm. And he gets in the perfect offense, and with the Rams, and just lights it up. And because he and Kurt Warner were great anticipation throwers. And that was an anticipation offense. And he had great receivers. So it's like, you look at Baker in his career right now. He was Rookie of the Year and beat the Steelers in the playoffs. I mean, he was never a bust. He got busted up in Cleveland. I thought all these guys that were number one picks, Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones was a high pick. They were high picks for a reason. They're talented, and they get it. They just weren't in the right system. And sometimes when you bounce around like they did, all of a sudden somebody loves you. Hey, you're my guy, man. That talent comes out better. And because now I have somebody that truly believes in me. In New York, they're booing Daniel Jones off the field. Well, he beat us in his first game. I said, whew, this guy's got it, because he was so athletic and was very accurate. So, I mean,
and big.
Not surprising me at all what he's doing in Indy right now.
Yeah. As you watch like Dylan Gabriel of Cleveland, it seems like he's not ripping it. Like he's just kind of taking the short, intermediate, very quick passes. How would you approach a quarterback like that, because your whole thing is don't risk it, no biscuit. How would you approach a conversation with a guy like that? Because, I mean, mistakes do matter. You can't just say, okay, we'll just throw it. I guess, how do you nurture a quarterback to start opening it up a little bit more?
I think that's the system too. With Dylan, he's obviously can throw it, because he did it at Oregon, he did it at Oklahoma. I mean, he put it down the field. It's a matter of when to do it. All right, when do you have the right matchup? We're not just dropping the ball back and throwing it deep. We have to have the perfect matchup and the perfect coverage, or checkdowns are great. Sometimes checkdowns are better than throwing the ball down the field, especially when they're playing Tampa 2. You might get 15 yards checking it down to your back, and you're throwing it down there. They're going to get somebody blown up or get intercepted. So it's like, know when to do it is the more thing than doing it. It's just know when to do it.
And that, of course, has to, for me, bring up Jameis Winston, the guy that maybe did do it, but also didn't know when to do it as much as he should have. And he's someone that's grown on me. Like, I love him. I love his energy. I love everything about him. But I have to ask what that experience was like, because your whole thing is, hey, you got to take that risk. And then you're met with your maker in a way in Jameis Winston that is going to test that patience more than anyone. What was that like?
Oh, he threw for 5,000 yards and 36 touchdowns. That's unheard of, But the 30 interceptions, that didn't bother me until the last four. The last four in the last two games were, the last one was the first play we put in when we got there. And he was just going to force that ball to Cameron Brate. And he had Mike Evans back there one-on-one and should have took it. And that was we can fix a lot of this. Just take that damn Superman cape off You're the number one pick. We all know that. Just play quarterback. You don't have to be superhuman anymore. You've proven that you can play. But then we had to look behind door number 2, not knowing that Tom Brady was behind door number 2. Or we would never give up on Jameis. I never considered giving up on Jameis. It was just Tom Brady was a better option for us at that time.
Yeah, sometimes life just presents you with something you have to take, and understandably you obviously get Tom Brady and everything that he came with. Did he help orchestrate like a lot of those guys that came to Tampa? I mean, it sure seemed like it with Gronk and everything. And so, there was more than just Brady that came in a way.
Yeah, he helped us with Gronk, and that was a huge part because that's his security blanket. Later in the year, we added Antonio Brown, but that was because Chris and Mike were hurt. And then we got them all back, and that was a hell of a trio. Maybe one of the best trios I've been around: Mike, Chris, AB, and Gronk.
Crazy.
And we had a hell of an offensive line that stayed healthy that year.
Yeah. I was just thinking through the wishbone. So the circular nature you mentioned of things that die and then maybe present themselves again, it's really funny in football how that happens. You started in the wishbone in college. You played the wishbone, right?
My senior year.
Okay. Do you think we'll ever see an offense like that back in the NFL? Do you think it will ever make a comeback, or is it because passing is more important today and we've realized how valuable it is, it's just not going to ever see a resurgence?
I don't think we'll ever see the wishbone. I think if a really good college team went back to it, they would run everybody out of the stadium. But in the NFL, I don't think a quarterback could live. Because the quarterback has to run the football in that offense. Yeah. And you've seen a lot of triple option football ideas in the NFL right now. There are RPOs. There's RPOs with a pitch man, and that's triple option football in a different way. The hard bootleg throwbacks, play a hard down the line throwback. That's old wishbone philosophy. And, Tom Moore, who I think is one of the best geniuses of offensive football because he can teach and it's so simple. And, he bought in. We had that really wide, hard zone play. Then we throw it back across the field. And those things, that's the cyclical part that you see. But I think you're seeing more option football in college and out of the shotgun. And Philly does a little bit. A lot of people are doing the RPO stuff. Patrick Mahomes is a master at it. And every now and then they run the down the line option and pitch it. But the option football is a great play because it's a series of audibles after the ball snapped.
Yeah. Crazy idea here. Will we ever see two quarterbacks on the field at the same time? As I see more and more of these athletes like Anthony Richardson, Jalen Milroe, you wonder, okay, like they may not be qualified enough to run an offense ever in the NFL and get back to being the primary quarterback. But is there a world that we ever see two quarterback system with one of those hyper athletes where the team says, okay, we're fine if he gets hurt because we see this guy more as a Tim Tebow or running quarterback, and we're going to play him more as a running back? Is there ever a world where we see two quarterbacks on the field at the same time, not just as a gadget play, but as a set of plays that a team comes to play with?
Oh, gosh, yeah. I mean, New Orleans Saints the last 2 years with Taysom Hill. He was a tight end, he's a running back, and you better be ready for his offense. And, they've split the quarterback out, and all of a sudden he's running quarterback power. I mean, that's a hard thing to get ready for because it's two totally different offenses. And, I think, you go back to Cordell Stewart and Slash and some of the things he could do as a receiver. But I don't think those guys right now are willing to play another position, all right, to get on the field. But you can have those packages. You see it all the time now. You'll see those running quarterbacks. They got a red zone package. We had a young guy named Jonathan Franklin who was on the Last Chance U, and we had an entire package because we taught him how to play wide receiver, and he was a good one. But then we also had his quarterback wildcat package because he could throw the ball. And Brady was split out, and then he got his knee tore up the last week of the preseason, and that whole package went out the window. So But yeah, I think it's there. Not a lot of teams are using it. Not a lot of teams have two different style quarterbacks. That's very hard to do. Your backup can't be totally different than your starter because you can't have two different offenses. You can't teach that much.
I just wonder because with Taysom Hill, it was mostly like they would just bring him in and he'd be taking direct snaps if he was in the running position. If he was in the quarterback position, it was like almost always a running play, but he would get like 5-6 yards a rip, and so it was very effective. And because of that, like watching him, I just I'm brought back to: is there going to be someone who says, okay, we're actually going to come in and we're going to run this like 5 to 10 times a game where we have both quarterbacks on the field and one of them is lining up almost as a tailback, and Anthony Richardson, let's just say, I don't know. I don't know if there's space for that or if that would work. I really want to see someone try, though.
Yeah, I think, I've seen it. Everybody gets in the Wildcat. They're doing it with a running back. Alabama did it with a 6'7", 350-pound offensive tackle last week. But, I think it's a great idea. I've seen it. One quarterback handoff to the other, he throws it. But I think it's more of a hybrid player like a Taysom Hill, who you never know when it's going to get behind center. Two things are going to happen. He's going to run it. He's going to throw it deep. And you better have the defense set for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome, man. I really appreciate your time. And
you bet, bro.
Yeah, I'd love to, run it back sometime. But yeah, this has been great. And thanks again for taking some time here with me.
You got it, bro. Anytime.